August meeting of the Kansas State Board of Education to order. We're meeting in the boardroom, and as I think folks can see, we're all masked, observing social distance the best we can, and we do have some plexiglass dividers between us. The meeting is live streamed on YouTube for the public to observe and listen, so we'd like to welcome everybody who is listening. I'd like to acknowledge that all board members are present today, and Michelle Dombrowski is not able to join us today. I would like to welcome everybody who is listening. We have a few members here in the audience, and like to acknowledge that our teachers, I think probably almost all of our teachers are back in session by now in their buildings preparing for the students. And as we all know, this is going to certainly be a very different start of the school year. The teachers are busy, and the administrators, the school, all the school personnel, paraprofessionals, office staff, custodial, food service workers, everybody is busy working on the Navigating Change 2020 document, taking a look at how to do things differently this year as we look to get back to school. We'd like to thank everybody for their hard work. We know parents are still making decisions and looking at options. Students are, I think probably most of them are pretty anxious to get back to school and see their friends, of course. We all know how that is. So this year is going to be a very different year, and we know we're going to have to be flexible and make adjustments as we go. But we'd like to thank everybody for all their hard work and welcome the teachers and all the personnel, school personnel back. And I know a number of students will be coming back soon. Some students the last week in August, and some students right after Labor Day. So welcome to all those folks when they do come back. I'd like to remind everybody to watch out for those school buses when they start rolling. And they will be. Students will be waiting at the bus stops and to go slow during those school zones. Those lights will be starting to flash. Please pay attention to those and slow down during those school zones to help those students be able to get to and from school safely. I would like to read the mission statement of the Kansas State Board of Education, which is to prepare Kansas students for lifelong success through rigorous quality academic instruction, career training, character development, according to each student's gifts and talents. And our vision is for Kansas to lead the world in the success of each student. At this time, I'd ask that we pause for a moment of silence. Thank you. And if we'd please stand and join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, board members, on the agenda, we are going to item number 11, the update on dyslexia training and timeline. We're going to change that to a receive item and not information. So that will be a receive item, and then we'll vote on that next month. Are there any other changes to today's agenda? And if not, I'd take a motion to approve the agenda. Jim McNeese to approve, and Jim Porter for a second. All in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Abstain. Okay, that will be an 8-0-1. Thank you. Okay, there are two sets of meetings for July for the minutes. First, are there any additions or corrections to the July 14th and 15th, which was the regular state board meeting? And if not, I'd take a motion to approve. Okay, Ann Maw moves to approve. Dina Horst is a second. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, that looks like a 9-0. Thank you very much. And then we had a special meeting on July 22nd. And are there any additions or corrections to this meeting on July 22nd? If not, I take a motion to approve that meeting. Jim McNeese and a second, Ben Jones. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, it looks like a 9-0 on that. Just a reminder to the audience, minutes aren't official until they've been approved by the board, and then the minutes are posted to the board's webpage. At this time, Commissioner's already at the podium, and I'm going to ask him to join us and go over the Commissioner's report today, and I think he's got some good and interesting information. So, Randy, welcome.
Good's always in the criteria of the listener or the audience, probably, Madam Chair, but we do have some information. I want to bring you up to date on navigating change and a lot of things that are transpiring. I want you to know that as you've all joined me at faculty meetings, and I always start with a 10-second quiz. How many in the audience can name the state board members, and how many can you name? And I give them 10 seconds. And the reason for that is so you can't Google it, right? You can't get your phone out and Google it. And the answer is generally between 0 and 1. Right? If I'm in Hutchinson, they'll know Ben, right? Many of them. But let me just tell you that that's rising now over the last month. There's more that know the state board, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing because the work that you do every month is very, very important to schools. And I was talking to a group of aspiring teachers at Emporia State yesterday, the teacher college, originally in Kansas. 74 teachers getting ready to do internships and their student teaching. And we talked a lot, as much as you can over Zoom, where I was trying to engage over Zoom about how they're going to help every student be successful. And you could just see that they resonate. I asked all of them, I said, your success in college, how much of that is due currently to your ACT score and not a 1? Or your GPA? Well, a few GPA, but they listed the same criteria that we do on how we help students be successful, including academics. So I want to refer back to this document. And I just was thinking about this. It was a Thursday that the group presented the document to me. And you met in July, the following Tuesday. And between that Thursday and the time that you met, went through 5 revisions. Many of them minor, 5 revisions. And we've now gone through some others. And what I do for you, as you know, I send you, because this is guidance. There's no mandates in navigating change, but it's good guidance to help every local school district and community make good decisions. I send those changes out to you every Friday, and then as we get to the month, I'm going to recap those for you so that you always know, okay, here's what happened last week, and here's what we have going forward. You have the changes in front of you, about 5 pages in front of you. But I just wanted to remind you, while initially, and still do, take the CDC plan, the Stanford Medical School plan, the Harvard Medical School, University, wherever it is, they've looked at those plans. But this is a plan developed by Kansans. People that live next door to us, people who live down the street from us, teachers, administrators, doctors, school board members that gave of their time. In fact, today, I was on a call that we'll talk a little bit about in a few minutes, till 8:45 this morning, with physicians, KU Med Center, educators, crafting changes that they believed would assist you and in giving guidance to local communities. But that second bullet's so important. Local school districts and communities will take the guidance and make it their own. Make it their own. Because Kiowa County is remarkably different in the outbreak of COVID and the sparsity of spread out in that county versus Wyandotte County, where it's much more concentrated. It's got a different spread rate. And that's what makes these challenging as you give guidance. Our goals are still the same. We have to attend the social, emotional, and academic rigor that we need to have, whether we're in a face-to-face, remote, or in some hybrid. And that third bullet should be on all of our minds. Equity and access is essential, meaning every student should have access to those two learning in any environment that either the school has to go to because of the virus or that a parent chooses. That's difficult. Sherry and I were talking before the meeting about a lot of board meetings last night, a lot of board meetings, long board meetings. I think Ben and I, a lot of long board meetings. What are they? They're arguing about everything, right? Every little thing. At the end of the day, though, we have to make sure that every child in whatever school district we're talking about, Lions, that they have access, that it's not some kids, it's all kids. And so as parents are making the choice, is the environment safe in Chase County, for example, and whether to go remote or not? We know that schools are trying to maximize those environments as much as possible to enable families to be safe. Those learning environments, there are three, but there are three that merge together all the time. On-site. When anyone asks you, and I hope that you talk to school board members, superintendents, principals, our goal is to have people on site. It should be all year. It may not be safe to do that, and we may have to alter those plans. I'd ask the St. Louis Cardinals. You had to alter plans. But our goal is to have students on site. Here's the reason. There's no better education than a loving, caring teacher engaging face-to-face with the student. That is the best we can do. And so that's what our aspirations are, and they should drive our decisions at the local level. When we can't do that, we can do some hybrid, and I'm going to talk about several hybrid today. Most common is students going every other day, but when we get to elementary or at-risk kids, you can modify that. At-risk kids could go 5 days a week, where some other kids go every other day. So you can be creative on the hybrid. What you're trying to do is shrink the population so you can spread them out, like you see the chairs here, right? And that's not possible if you're setting at Lincoln Elementary School. If I just say Lincoln, that covers how many elementary schools in Kansas, right? A bunch. If I say Lincoln Elementary, but a lot of those would have 25 kids in them, and they were built in a different generation, and they only may be 800 square feet, 900 square feet rooms, so they're tight. So hybrid, and you can see Topeka 501's talked about micro classrooms where they're trying to spread that out. And then, if need be, schools may have to go remote because of the high virus load, or parents may choose remote because they want to have a level of safety that no matter what we do in schools is just not able to be provided. This is our website, and I apologize for how small it is, but you can get to this Navigating Change document right off of our main page. Just click on it, takes you to this page. Here's why you want to kind of bookmark that, and the audience wants to bookmark it. Because you can go back, and you can see very clearly when the document gets updated by the date that it gets updated. And that section that says updated document will take you through the changes that have been made, all of them. So you don't have to go looking for them. I'll go over that with you. Many times it is a word here or there, some acknowledgments, but sometimes it's substantial. So here they are, and you have this handout if it's easier for you to see. Here are the updates over the last couple weeks. I'm not going to go over the table of contents because every time we update, that has to be updated. Funding remote learning. Get to know that document because you're going to get asked a lot of questions about how are we going to fund these kids that are remote? How are we going to count them? Here's what we're working on. You're going to hear from districts, can we waive the 1,116 hours? The answer is you do have the authority to do that as of the last session in a state of emergency. But we shouldn't make that determination in August, whether we're going to waive the 1,116 hours. We haven't even started school. But come the spring, if it's been disrupted, you have the authority to make that if the governor has declared a state of an emergency. Okay? Most of the time, that's going to be county by county. The remote funding, the funding remote learning talks is the sheet that tells you this is how you can get funded with kids that are remote, that are not in a virtual environment, but in a remote environment, and what the difference is. Grade bands, we've added library media to the competencies. Family engagement, kudos to that group that put together. Jane worked hard on that, and other people put the family engagement, and there's an implementation guide for social emotional learning. Those were added, and you can see the date that those were added. I want to pause here on the operations because here's a major change led by the doctors in Kansas. And when I say the doctors, we're talking about the University of Kansas Medical System, the Kansas family physicians, and the Kansas pediatricians. Remember, originally they said for younger kids, that's elementary down to pre-K, we're worried that young kids are going to do this. Ben and I were talking about special needs. They're going to pull at the mask, and it will defeat the purpose of the mask. So while masking's good, we're going to recommend maybe younger kids, you don't need to mask. And then you know what they found out? They did, across the United States, a little look at Head Start children, 3 and 4-year-olds, and some extended school year, Ben, some special needs kids. And you know what they found? Kids were begging to wear the mask. They wanted to wear the mask. They were better than the adults at wearing the mask. And with that, the doctor said, we now recommend any student in school to wear a mask, recommended. And that's the change. So it was, and face shields, the doctor said, we now know face shields are not as effective by themselves as a mask. They're great in conjunction with the mask. And so while better than nothing, we still recommend a mask for the classroom. The appendix then, you can see that Kansas COVID work group, that is the doctor work group, that's just what they call themselves. You can see the SEC. A couple of masks for kids, my mask schedule. Those are just some suggestions for how you help kids get used to masking up. And then you can see acknowledgments and additions to the webpage. And coming soon, not only professional development, but we have 20 pre-made lessons for every grade band right now. There will be hundreds in the next week. Take it off the shelf and use it. Take it off the shelf and modify it. Done by the best teachers in Kansas. Hundreds of them have submitted those. So that is what has happened in the last couple weeks since you met. And we'll continue. So again, what will happen is every Friday on your Friday note, we will highlight any of the changes that have been made for you and what those are. And then every meeting until we get to some place where we're not making changes very often, I will go over with you in my commissioner's comments the changes that have been made and give you an opportunity to ask questions, which you can do obviously on every Friday too. Here are the kind of the leadership of the Navigating Change. Is Corey Gibson, Shannon Ralph. Corey, Superintendent of the Year. Shannon Ralph, former Teacher of the Year. Brad and Craig oversaw Brad, the learning side, and Craig, the operation side. And we continue to meet to vet all of these. And also, as I mentioned to you, there's another group of people that on the operations side are critical. And they have given hundreds of hours volunteer to help schools open safely. You can see those people and representatives of those people. One this morning who had their own daughter in surgery was scrubbed up and was still on the call because that passionate about trying to get this right for Kansas kids and Kansas teachers and schools. Can't say enough about KDHE, their epidemiologist and their leadership there, It's great when you're combining people that study viruses for a living with people that study humans and how that interacts, doctors, and then school people saying, well, I don't know if that's going to work. That's really powerful. And that's what we have and we've had for a long time. And so today, this is easier to see if you look here. I'm announcing some gating criteria, and I just want to say I am so thankful to Frank Harwood and Corey Gibson and Shannon Ralph and those doctors I mentioned, Craig, Brad, a variety of people. They have been working literally since probably when we banged the gavel back in July. They've been working on gating criteria that can assist Western Kansas and Southeast Kansas and our urban and our suburban and our rural. And this is really difficult to do. So I just want to applaud their efforts. Again, recommendations, guidance. Nothing in this is mandated, but I want to walk you through it. First, you're going to see it's color-coded. Green is where we aspire to be. Green, yellow, orange, red. Red is remote only. So you can see in learning, under green, we would be on site. You would see then on school activities, spectators, visitors, and playgrounds, it's on site following the navigating change guidance, which are masks, social distancing, clean your hands every hour, a variety of other things, make sure your HVAC system's working properly, etc. But that's what we aspire to be. Most counties today would be in the green. That's not where most of the people live, but most counties would be in the green. Now, where most people live are going to be in somewhere around yellow, orange, or red. And you can see there in yellow, the elementary may be on an on-site or hybrid. We'll talk about that. By the time we get to red, it's remote only, and we're extremely limited. So you'll want to know what's the gating criteria then that we're going to look at. That is on the next page, and we'll come back and forth to these. So there's some building criteria, and there's some community criteria. And we've put this in somewhat the order that you want to look at, but here's what's important. Janet, you're not going to be an expert at this, all right? But let me tell you who should be. Your local county health officer in conjunction with KDHE and your local physicians. So superintendents aren't going to be they're going to be collaborators, but those are the people that are going to be really knowledgeable about this data. So let's accept the first one, which is building gating criteria. The physicians and the epidemiologists think that one of the best things that we can know about is student absenteeism on any given day. So take the average daily attendance, and we're going to go back. I'm getting some feedback here, guys. So you're going to go to last year, Jim, and you're going to look at Udall's average daily attendance for the year. Let's say it was 95%. That's their baseline. Kathy, Wichita would be whatever theirs was. Jim, Fredonia would be whatever Fredonia is, right? It's whatever it was last year. That's our baseline. Here's the reason. The more poverty you have, the lower that ADA is. And so if you set it at some mark, some people are going to be disadvantaged or advantaged either way. So you set that, whatever it was. Maybe McPherson, when I was there, is around 95, 96%. And then you take your attendance each day and you average it over a week. And if you're within 3% of that average last year, so in our case, 95, if you're between 92, 90 to 95, you're in green. Does that make sense? Your absentee rate is working fine. When it starts to move above 3%, you want to start consulting with your local health official. Because as that moves toward 10%, we are starting to see reasons why kids are out of school for some reason. They're not coming to school, they're ill. And Since a lot of young people are asymptomatic, that's an indicator that that may be something that you want to start looking at, shutting down schools if you see it. Now, Jim McNeese will remember, when we got to about 10% in flu season, county health people started getting a little antsy. In this case, though, it gets above 3%, we're starting to have these discussions because COVID's a much faster spreader than flu was even at flu season. So this is the building criteria. The others are community criteria, county community criteria. So 2-week county percent positive versus those tested. If it's less than 5%, you're in green. If it's more than 15%, we're in red. That's just simply the number of people tested in 2 weeks. You're dividing the ones that tested positive by the number of total cases. So if we tested 100 people in Osage County, and 7% of those that were tested came back positive, you would be in the yellow category here. That's the second criteria. Third criteria is the 2-week cumulative incident rates per 100,000 over the last 2 weeks. So you can see the example on the right. So let's say you had a county of 50,000 people and you had 15 cases, total of that 50,000. That would be 30 per 100,000, and that would be you're in the green area. And then your trend in the county rate, is it going up or down? And finally, your capacity of your local hospital. Now, all of those are taken into consideration in consultation between a superintendent, a board, and their local health official, and any local physicians. There's not one that triggers, because you're looking at it holistically and then making a decision. That's the best guidance. If you use one, what's going to happen is you're going to get a highly density, population. It'll skew it versus a sparsely density population. So you've got to look at this holistically. And then if you remember back here, that hybrid that has the asterisk, when you get to yellow or orange for elementary, one of the things that you could do is you could group students in cohorts of less than 15 students and spread them out. Now I can tell you that when I was Superintendent McPherson, it may have changed for Shiloh, I couldn't do that. It wasn't because of space. I didn't have enough teachers to get down to that ratio. I could find the space between churches, community building. I couldn't find enough teachers. Now that may have changed. I've been gone 6 years. But that's an option. Topeka 501, I believe Ann is trying to execute that option from day one. Got to applaud them because they're kind of planning to try to do this in an extremely large school district, which will then enhance their likelihood of not being shut down. All right. Here's what you would have to do in those facilities in order to keep kids safe. And then, of course, you'd have a team of people, and they would rotate between those sites as a team. The nurses, special ed, some teachers, administrators, some specials probably between those. So I'm going to come back. I've given a lot of information. You're going to have a ton of questions. And you're going to be a good guinea pig to the 12:30 Thursday when I get to talk to superintendents about all this. But before I answer questions, Madam Chair, on any of this, please, in your local communities, go thank your local physicians and county health people. I can't tell you how much they've stepped up to try. I mean, they have kids in school, and Dr. Turan, University of Kansas, had his young kid with him this morning. Well, I said, so you have a helper today? He said, my wife had to go to work, and I'm in charge. He's working, right? Just like it's going to happen with teachers, it's going to happen with all kinds of workers, and they were on early this morning finalizing this plan. So, Madam Chair, with that, I'll be happy to walk through as many questions as you have, and then I know you're going to talk about this later on today.
board members, we will bring this back this afternoon. So, because I know it's new to everybody, and you got to kind of digest it. It is, I think, quite an amazing piece of work. I looked at it with Randy yesterday when I came up, and so I'm still studying it and trying to figure it out. But I know you've got some questions now, and then we'll be back this afternoon after you've had a chance to look at it, and I'm sure you'll have some more questions.
Madam Chair, just please know, I did not go to medical school. I did not even stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. So I will do my best, if you did into the details of some of the gating, to explain that as best I can.
Okay, Steve Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you said, Randy, they have to look at this holistically in order for it to be effective. So the potential problem I see right off the bat is on the gating criteria. If we have an increasing community gating criteria, if it's increasing, we're in the red. And so folks who aren't familiar with the holistic perspective are going to jump on that and say, we have an increase, we're in the red. That's going to happen unless we stress more emphatically what you just said about being holistic.
And be holistic, and locals get to make the decision in conjunction with each other, right? This is guidance. I think people are doing that now, Steve. People are jumping to I read this. You know, I just had a conversation with someone, said, oh, what do you do all day? Well, I farm, deliver. Well, when did you have a PhD? Well, I read it. Okay. But what I love about this is these were professionals in Kansas coming together, giving their best advice, and now saying, okay, in Finney County, cases are pretty high, but Steve Carlin's been running summer school all summer for at-risk kids pretty successfully. So when you see this data, Steve, you're not only going to see it by county, you're going to see it broken out. KDHE is going to break it out by age group. And you're going to see a 2-week trend by age group in every county. So if you have an outbreak, let's say in Gove County at a nursing home, you could say, well, we don't have any outbreak with young kids, and that would influence your decision, if that makes sense.
But I'm sure you can appreciate, we in political positions, we deal with what you just touched on. People read one nugget and they know all about it, and they know how it has to be, and their way is the only way. And that's our biggest enemy in all this, in my view. And I know you appreciate that, but how do we convey that?
I think I'm going to add another, what is the enemy right now. And now I'm really going to show my age, Ben, on this one. The media cycle, and this isn't a bash of the media, is so quick and so social media driven. These are our neighbors, these are our friends, these are the people we take our kids to, these are the people we know. I trust them. They're not trying to do something political. They're trying to say, we're going to try to help you open schools, but we have to do it safely. And it's not a choose B. It's a complex thing. And so when I again ask superintendents, school boards, get your local county health, get your team of doctors, and maybe it's a town only has one. Sit down, look at this, start to look at the data KDHE gives you, and then you'll start making those decisions.
Other questions at this time, board members? I know this is news, but I'm sure we'll have more this afternoon. Randy, I'd like for you to speak a little bit in a couple of these options, and I know I'm looking in the chart and our friends at home are not, but in the orange and the yellow, we actually have 2 different learning suggestions depending upon the level, the pre-K 5 and the 6-12 in both yellow and orange. Talk a little bit to that, if you would, please.
Okay, so I'm going to talk first about the learning environment. And then we'll talk about the medical side, which is ever changing as we learn more about the virus. On the learning side, if you have a kindergarten or a first grader that's learning to read, being in person is much more beneficial than being remote. It's a little easier if you're studying U.S. history your junior year to be remote than for that student. So that's one of the reasons you see kind of a delay, you know, in trying to keep the elementary and the early kids in school more. So that's one. Second, is even with the latest data that I was just watching this morning, which is still coming out on early students, I think the medical physicians right now, and again, we're learning a lot about virus, and and the epidemiologists and the doctors are learning a lot. The spread of young people to both adults and within themselves seems to be less. I'm talking about young kids, not high school kids, middle school kids, than the middle school, high school kids or adults. And so that's why you see an attempt, those two reasons, to keep them more in school. And it could be on a hybrid situation. That you'll hear a lot about what's called A-B schedule, right? Just divide the alphabet. This alphabet goes Monday, Wednesday. This alphabet goes Tuesday, Thursday. The ingenious ones are saying, and Randy Watson, I need you every day. All right, so I got some kids going every day. I got some kids whose parents are choosing remote, and I got some doing hybrid. And for that reason, I can get my number below 15 and then spread them out. Does that make sense? So when you hear hybrid, there are many ways to do this, and you're looking at what are the student needs, what are the family needs, and how can I keep the numbers down and social distance as much as possible. And there's not a right or wrong to that because it's the size of the classroom to start with, the availability of teachers, and the physical size of the classroom. In the later years, when we ran a bond issue in McPherson, the elementary, we built 1,500 square feet elementary classrooms with a restroom in them. That's a much different scenario than if you're in a 1938 building with a 800 square foot, like Field Kennelly High School would be, and you're putting 25 in. So does that answer your question, Madam Chair?
Yes, thank you. Ann Mall?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Did you say we're going to discuss some of this later today? Where would that be?
It'll be in the chairman's report
Oh, okay.
this afternoon.
Well, a couple of things then, Randy. One is that I know we talked about schools using other facilities in the community to spread kids out. And the instant feedback I got was, you know how many regulations there are about where we can put kids? You know, I just don't have time to go out and make sure the church is built this way or that way. And so is that going to be a barrier? Because this has to come together pretty quick if they're going to do that.
I think anything can be a barrier, Ann. I like to see opportunities. So if I thought I could go use the Presbyterian church, I want to make sure it's, if I've got handicapped kids, it's ADA.
Right.
I want to make sure that they're not liable for things. I want to make sure I can clean it. So there are issues in doing that, but there's also opportunities. So I think, I can't say that there are not issues when you go out and take a community center, or we went to White Lakes Mall, right? I'm just using Topeka as an example. But I think there are things that we can overcome if we really need to do this.
I'm just wondering what our role could be in removing those barriers. I mean, seems like KDHE has a role there because they do the inspections and all that stuff. So I just want to make sure our partner's on board to clear the way so these things can happen. And the other thing was, thing about hours, I'm not too sure we can wait until January. Maybe we need just to let things start and see how it works. But you and I were talking about there are a lot of different ways to do hybrids. Some of them make a lot of sense to me. Some make no sense to me. Like one that doesn't make any sense is I'm going to have you 2 days a week, and then I'm going to give you something to do to keep you busy 6 hours a day for 3 days. I don't even see you. That particular model doesn't make sense. The one that makes sense to me is where the teacher's teaching the same group of kids every day, so they're all watching him or her, but sometimes they're in front of them in the class and sometimes they're at home. But I'm not sure how we guarantee the equity, and the notion that, you know, a kindergartner is going to be in front of a screen 6 hours a day just isn't going to work.
Well, I don't think we would ever advocate screen time of 6 hours a day. Now, if you think about learning that takes place in brick and mortar, they're not even listening or interact, they're doing
Right.
other things. And that's what we would encourage over that 6 hours. There's a PE time, there's an art time, there's a break time, there's a lunch time, there's all kinds of transitions. You know, there's this balance, and I smile, kind of comes back to Steve's question. Everyone loves local control until you don't. That's just true, right?
Yeah.
And whatever the issue, everyone loves local control until you don't. Our Constitution in Kansas on education is built on this local school district, 7 people, and then you have both constitutional duties. And so what I think we have to do is make sure that when we get a complaint that any kid's being left out, we look at that. But the local school district's got to wrestle with the details of this,
Right.
and that's their responsibility. So I have faith that they're going to do that. And I think last night you saw good examples of 2, 3, 4-hour meetings as they're really wrestling and trying to do what the public wants. As Gene and I said, and you knew what the public wants, it's either 40-60, 50-50, or 60-40, depending on the event. So these are challenging times, and I think all we can do is be supportive of the people trying to do the work and give them the best information that we can.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Jim McNeese?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Randy, this is more than an upgrade. This is a whole new direction. So thank you to the folks that did this and for the leadership that KSDE is providing as well. But you started your remarks with equity and access, and Ann was just talking about equity as well. Can you talk more about equity and access, especially as it relates to special education, special needs, and at-risk, along with equity and access in terms of remote learning?
Yeah, so we stand in the city where Brown v. Board took place. If there's nowhere in this country where we should be talking about equity and access, it ought to be right here in Kansas and Topeka. So this is dear to my heart. I have a special needs son, adult son. You can't say, well, we can't serve that special ed kid because we had to go remote. That's not acceptable. That comes back to Ann. That's not acceptable. I worry that in high poverty areas, if you go remote only for a long period of time, unless you've got really good systems, you're disproportionately hurting poor kids or low middle class or parents have to work. So one of the challenges from day one, so you have this learning environment where we know on-site's better. Guess what's better for the economy? On-site, because parents have to go work, and how are we going to do that? So Jim, we've got to keep the learner and the family at the forefront of how we make these decisions when the virus comes in or out, because it's going to happen. Look at Georgia schools. They tried to widely open, and now a lot of them are backpedaling. So we're going to have in and out of school, but we've got to make sure when we're out that certain groups of kids aren't being excluded because we don't know how to service them or we don't know how to access them. So that's why this planning right now and these thought processes are so important. And you've heard me say over and over, get your teachers together. I called my wife last night, said, how'd it go? She goes, oh, first day back. You know, it's tough, but we're going to make some progress. They've got 3 weeks in Newton where they're planning every day for all these scenarios so that when this happens, we can make sure that IEP is met. We can make sure that poverty kids or minority kids or affluent kids that are gifted are getting their needs met. It doesn't matter. And that is a huge challenge every day. And in brick and mortar, we've quadrupled that challenge, right, when you get disrupted. I think our role right here, KSDE and your role, is to make sure, though, that districts know that they have to do that. The details of how they do it's got to be their local board. But we've got to try to ensure that equity and access.
Can you also address the issues of our working with our legislature in terms of, you just mentioned hours, but, you know, finance. I heard this morning Indiana is talking about if you're not in a brick and mortar, you'll get 15% less money. You know, your budget will be cut. You know, things like that. Have we engaged the medical community, but are we engaging, you know, legislators and other political leaders and focus groups in our state?
I try to keep as close contact with the leadership in the House, in the legislature, and in the executive branch as possible. I will tell you that school districts are going to need every bit of money that they have in order to clean, provide masks, pivot, pay teachers to come in early, stay late, hire more subs, bring back people. They're going to need that. And I think our legislators have certainly indicated to me they understand that. What I think everyone wants in Kansas is we'd like to be back to normal. Now Russia today announced a vaccine, so I don't know, maybe that's, impressive. But for this year, we will not have a normal like we used to have it until we have a vaccine that everyone feels comfortable in taking. And that's probably a long ways away. So what we have to help everyone understand, Jim, is that a new normal, like we're here today, right? We're back to somewhat of a normal. We all wear masks, we have plexiglass, we've spread out, we're sanitizing our hands frequently. That's what we're going to have to do. So as we look at this, I think what legislators and what you and everyone wants, we want learning to occur, we want families to be taken care of, and we want to do it as well as we can. And that's what I've heard from legislative leadership, the governor's office, and certainly all of you.
Okay, board members, we've got 4 other people listed for questions, and then we're going to go to the agenda, and then we'll be back to this afternoon. So I know you'll have more questions then, and Randy will be prepared to answer that. So Gene Clifford?
Well, my question basically dealt with what Jim's was, and that was how this is going to be possible for students with disabilities, given that remote and hybrid doesn't always work as well as face-to-face.
So I want to emphasize this again because, again, whatever our attention span and soundbite is, you can miss the nuances. Even when we're in red, Gene, what isn't here, and it was always here in the spring, you could bring in students less than 10. We rarely did that. We may have to really look at those options. Severely handicapped kids may need to come into school. Kids that are severely at risk may need to, come in every day versus an every other day. That's why you don't want to just say this is the model. It's really a set of criteria that becomes an art form and putting that together for every community. In your community, what Steve and the staff and the board did there was remarkable over the summer. You know, what Fred did in Dodge and just in feeding kids was remarkable over the summer. That was a different response than maybe you would have had in Garnett, for example, but it met those needs.
Jim Porter?
I'll wait till this afternoon.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Porter. Dina Horst?
Thank you. When I'm looking at yellow and it says no high-risk activities, but how are we talking about the gating component, or are we talking about what school districts have decided, what format they've decided upon? For example, some have decided to start at least with hybrid. The reason I'm asking is because I know what are high-risk activities as far as Keisha is concerned. So could you
That's a great question.
talk a little bit more about that?
It only took someone on the Keisha executive board to ask. I was waiting for the question, so high-risk activities are defined by the National Federation of Sports, which Keisha then adopts. So I just want you to know what those are in Kansas. So they're football, wrestling, basketball, I think rugby, lacrosse, and maybe powerlifting if you're using spotters. I think.
Soccer's one also.
Yeah, and then there's moderate risk, and so if you got to 7-on-7 football, that's a moderate risk. It's not a high risk. You can see if you're in hybrid in yellow or in orange or red, but starting in yellow, it would say no high risk activities, which would mean no wrestling, no football. Now that's guidance, but I think every district's got to wrestle with this. We're going to go remote because the virus is high. It's not the ideal learning environment, not even close to the ideal learning environment, but we have to do it. But we still plan to play football. That's going to be an interesting community discussion. Because that's a high-risk activity. That's different than running cross-country or playing tennis or golf, which are fairly low-risk activities. So Dina, it's referring to that list of high-risk activities, which, as you know, the Acacia Board left that open to every school district. So this is guidance, but hopefully it will lead to some really great conversations at the local district about the learning environment and the playground environment and the activity environment.
Well, thank you, Randy. We appreciate you bringing this to us, and we'll be back with this afternoon. So everybody might want to make this their lunchtime reading document. So appreciate the work and appreciate all the people who've worked on this document to bring it to us and get it to us now. So thank you very much. Okay. We have Citizens Open Forum next. I am going to declare Citizens Open Forum of the Kansas State Board of Education meeting open at 10:51. The State Board provides opportunity for citizens to share views about topics of interest or issues currently being considered by the State Board. The State Board asks that speakers identify themselves by name and the name of the group they represent if applicable. The State Board also asks that each speaker focus their remarks on issues or topics. Personal attacks will not be tolerated. Each speaker shall have 3 minutes, and board questions will be limited to clarification. And since we have no members, I am going to close the Citizens Open Forum. So Citizen Open Forum is closed at 10:52. And again, we thank folks when they do make comments to us as far as citizens' comments that are going to the board. Okay, so at this time, I'd like to move to the next agenda item, and this is an action item. Last month, we received these particular KSDE recommendations for accreditation. So you did receive these last month. They were presented to us, and that we will vote on these this month. And this information, if you're looking in your agendas, on page 27. So we will receive 4 districts. So Michelle, is he up, or do you need me to adjust for a minute here?
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Commissioner Watson, thank you so much. So I believe it's this one. Maybe? That's not it. KSDE, try that one.
That looks like it's it.
There we go. That's it.
There we go.
Thank you, sir.
That's the next agenda.
Okay. So before you today, we have USD 202 Turner, USD 303 Ness City, USD 389 Eureka, and then Heart Springs. You'll notice there's a different district number in front of those. That's how we designate our private systems. Those are the systems that we are bringing in front of you today to have conversation around accepting the recommendations from the Accreditation Review Council. And I am happy at this time to answer any questions you may have about that.
So board members, anybody have any questions? These are 4 districts, again, one of them private. Janet Wall.
I don't have a question. I'll make a motion. I move that the Kansas State Board of Education accept the recommendation of the Accreditation Review Council and award the status of accreditation to USD 202 Turner, USD 303 Ness City, USD 389 Eureka, and X0758-1881 Heart Spring.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the recommendation of accreditation for those 4 districts. Jim McNeese seconds that motion. Any further questions or discussion? Okay, if not, I'd call for a vote. All in favor of the recommendation of accreditation for these districts, please raise your hand. Okay, opposed? Abstain. Okay, so that's 801. Okay, thank you, and actually, we are scheduled for a break, and I think the next item may take a few minutes, so let's take a 10-minute break and be back at 11:05, board members. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Next board agenda item is item number 9, and we are going to receive the Accreditation Review Council recommendations for KISA. If you want to follow along, this information will begin on page 55. We will vote on these in September, and there are 3 districts, it looks like, that we're taking a look at. So we'll go over each one individually, probably ask questions on each one, is what I would think would work best. Okay, great. Okay, welcome back.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I neglected earlier, I suppose I should introduce myself, more importantly, my assistant director for those folks who are listening in Zoom land. I'm Michelle Miller, Director of Teacher Licensure and Accreditation, and I have my assistant director, Jeanette Novo, with me as well. I appreciate the opportunity to bring you information on these 3 systems. We felt that before we started, we should maybe take a moment to go back over the definitions so that you are clear on what each of the 3 of these mean. I don't want to read them to you word by word. But what I think I want you most importantly to understand is that this process that's developed over the last 3 or 4 years, all the while had the intention of being a balanced process, right? Between the hard data and between the system's intentional, well-defined process of continuous improvement. So that's the way the ARC, the Accreditation Review Council, has approached each of these systems and any system that has come before them. We were lucky enough to have you all support the creation of a document, a 1-page executive summary for each of the systems based on your state board goals. So that's kind of the beginning of the data piece that we look at. And then the ARC really dives in to see if there is conclusive evidence, to use the words in this definition, of an intentional, well-defined quality growth process. The conditionally accredited status, we don't spend a lot of time with the ARC talking about areas of compliance because that's really the work of the agency. We work to help our systems be compliant, right? So anywhere there is a deficit with any of the systems, that's something that the agency is typically working with. The ARC is made aware if there is an area there. It is our role as an agency to guide in those areas, and our work as an agency, we do that well. We guide systems well in the area of compliance. So again, what we want them to really be concentrated on are those 2 areas of data, growth in the data, and an evidence of a defined intentional quality growth process. The conditionally accredited status would mean that there was something in one of those 2 pieces that wasn't evident or that was lacking. And of course, the final recommendation definition that the ARC might give to you is that of not accredited. So that would mean one of 3 things. The system isn't good in compliance. They've got areas in compliance based on the definitions you all have created around that particular area. They did not provide conclusive evidence of growth, or the system was not able to provide any evidence of an intentional process. We've started this week, Jeanette and I, our conversations with our service center partners, with folks in the field who, although they're wrestling with all the things they're wrestling with right now, they know that this is still there for them. And when we talk about that balance, I was lucky enough, Dr. Watson may not think so, he couldn't get on a Zoom with the ARC up in his office several weeks ago, and so I invited him down into my office, and I watched him work with the ARC and talk with the ARC and really share that idea of balance between the data and between the human process that has to take place inside a system, right? And I love that that's the process you all have blessed and allowed us to move forward with, that it isn't just that cut and dry black and white list, if you will. So any area of deficit in one of those 3 spaces would cause the ARC to make a recommendation to you all of not accredited. And before Jeanette moves in, I'm happy to answer any questions on those 3 areas, should you have them.
Don't see any right now.
So last month, our general counsel during our presentation presented to you the appeals process for a system who might be conditionally accredited. I wanted to kind of bring that up again because the systems for your review today and were all at one point in time conditionally accredited, okay, by the ARC as a recommendation. So I wanted to just go through a little bit with you in terms of what that process was. Once we identified our appeal team, the first part of that process is a mediation process. The system appeals and sends us some information addressing the concerns of the Accreditation Review Council. At that point in time, then, we submit that information to the system and say, here are, here to the ARC, here are the concerns, here are how the system has responded to those concerns. Can you review these as part of the process and take a look at whether or not the appeal information that was provided has sufficient information for a change in the accreditation recommendation status? The first part is that mediation piece. So the mediator goes in and gives the information to the ARC, right? Works with the ARC, then goes back to the system, gives back the system the information that the ARC gave. If the ARC members that were part of that appeal team process decide that they needed some additional information, they request that. And so it's a little give and take back and forth from that, okay? So if at that point in time, let's say that the appeal team through the mediation decides that they're going to maintain that conditionally accredited recommendation, then the system has the option of saying, I want a hearing panel. I want to go to a hearing officer with an appeals panel. And if that's the case, then we move on to the second phase of the appeals process. At this point in time, neither of these systems that appealed went to that second phase of the process. That's why they're being brought to you today for your review. So for you today, we have Paola, who was recommended as a conditionally accredited system, who appealed, and that the ARC found that the conditional accreditation, thank you, that the conditional accreditation should continue. We are also bringing to you El Dorado, or El Dorado, depending upon, depending I say it with a Spanish accent, no, okay. So El Dorado is here for you as well. They also appealed their conditionally accredited status. When they submitted information, the Accreditation Review Council switched their recommendation from conditionally accredited to a recommendation of accreditation. And then we have Hope Lutheran system, who really did not appeal their conditionally accredited status at all, okay? So I'll start off with Paola. Paola appealed the conditional accreditation decision. The appeal process did not change as part of the review. There were some needs for measurable goals and data to demonstrate the improvement process. They were not able, in their report, the ARC felt that their goals were not stated in any measurable way, so there was no way of knowing that there was a process in place or what was it that they were trying to achieve. Although their data was not bad, and as a matter of fact, they did get a bronze on, I think, the assessment information, they still there was nothing that addressed how they were going to work on the issues of their African-American population, which was declining on that area. Okay, so there was no way of saying, I understand my process, I understand what I'm doing, I know where I'm going with this, and therefore that's why the ARC indicated that they should not move to accredited, instead left them at conditionally accredited. They felt also that the information that was submitted to them did not give them additional information to warrant a change. And before I move on to the other one, I'll just leave that one in case there's questions.
Okay, so, questions on payola, Jim Porter? I'll wait till we get to Okay. Any questions on payola? Okay, why don't you go ahead then?
Okay. El Dorado, they also appeal. They were originally recommended for conditionally accreditation through the Accreditation Review Council. They appealed their decision. The Accreditation Review Council felt that there was not data to support what they were saying, and so they asked and requested additional data to support their statements because they couldn't find any originally. They supplied that information, and then the new superintendent indicated in their accreditation summary in their appeal step-by-step process of what she was planning to do in the future in order to improve on a process that was, which she felt that was lacking at that point in time. So they're aligning their strategic plan with KISA, and there was a lot of evidence of next steps an identification, if you will, that there was an understanding of the process and what needed to happen in order to improve their results.
Questions for El Dorado? Anybody? Okay.
The last one being presented to you is Hope Lutheran. Hope Lutheran is a private system. They did not appeal their conditional accreditation. This system was originally a year one system. In other words, it came in 2017 and 18 as a year five system. They were doing Cognia, which is advanced ed, or was advanced ed. But what we identified was the advanced ed system that they were doing at the time was the national system and was not being worked through Kansas. Consequently, it was understandable at that point in time why there were a lot of pieces with regard to KISA and data and those things that was not available at that time from that report. So at that point in time, the ARC said, let's put some process in place and let's send it back, because if you recall, we indicated at the beginning that systems can move back and forth. The first year, the ARC kind of just moved them. The second year, we came to you requesting the move. So we kind of switched that up just a little bit at that point in time. So they did. They sent them back and they said, here are 5 or 6 things that you need to do and complete for us. And you need to come back. We need to see this the next time you come back, and let us know when you intend to come to us with these things. So they came in this year. They had the information for a couple of years, had not really apparently worked very much on it. And the ARC felt that it was pretty evident that because they had indicated that they were going to come in at this point in time, they felt that it was pretty evident that it was just a quick working the document to just get to that point. So consequently, they said, we're not going to recommend accreditation for the system. The board goals were not fully addressed, and so that's part of their recommendation in terms of their areas for improvement, that they need to make sure that they address those board goal areas.
Okay, are there specific questions on Hope Lutheran? I see a couple questions up here, but I don't necessarily know that they're Hope Lutheran. Any questions on Hope Lutheran? Okay, if not, we do have some questions overall, so we'll start with Jim Porter.
Okay, you indicated that there was a two-step appeal process, that Paola had gone through step one, Hope Lutheran had not. Is there a time frame? You can't say, for instance, could Paola go ahead and do that? Or can Hope Lutheran go ahead and go to step one? Or at the time that we make a decision next month, does that eliminate that possibility?
Those systems have already gone through that process. Payola has already worked through our appeals process.
But not the hearing officer part of it?
Correct, they chose not to. That was an opportunity for them, should they want to go to that final step, and they chose not to do so. They didn't feel that, Scott has explained to Jeanette and I that that last opportunity is an opportunity for someone to say the process wasn't worked the way that it should have been, and Payola agreed that the process had been worked the way that it should have been, so that there was no need to go any farther to the hearing portion.
Okay.
So originally, when the information from the ARC is done and the executive summary is written, it is sent out to the system, to the superintendent and to the board president. At that point, and the keys of contact if it tends to be different, okay? They have 15 days, working days 15 days to respond to the, to say whether they're going to appeal or they accept the recommendation. Once they appeal, then we begin our process of identifying that the appeal team, the mediation part first. And right now in our system, we're working on the number of times, but right now it was like 90 days, but we're really thinking it should be kind of a little bit shorter. We don't want this to really expand, further. I think both El Dorado's and Paola's has been done really efficiently. We have one right now that's in the process, and I think it is taking almost the 90 days. It's not in front of you at this point in time, but that's because school starting, the navigating change came in, a lot of things then came in. And so remember, our ARC members are volunteers, and they work in systems that require their attention elsewhere sometimes. So that one just is taking a little bit longer, but not past the 90 days.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I have a follow-up and one additional question. I don't want to know names, but what types of people are on their review team? I don't mean the ARC, but I mean the appeal team. How do you choose who's on the appeal team, and what are their qualifications? Briefly.
Okay.
No names.
Go ahead.
Okay, so one of the things that we did is we identified who might be a mediator. We sent a list to Dr. Watson on here might be some members that could be the mediator, as well as, then the mediator then selects who that initial appeal team members will be. At this point in time, we have selected portions of the ARC members, and the reason for that is that they were the ones that provided the recommendation, right? So they would know what they were looking for. So when the appeal comes back from the system, they would be able to then know whether or not the information they needed was sufficient or not. Then the hearing panel, we have selected, the hearing officer is our Attorney General, Scott Gordon. And the appeal panel at that point in time, we gave, again, Dr. Watson, we gave him an extensive list of members, both in-house as well as from the field, retired, community, current, excuse me, current educators, etc. And he did go ahead and make a selection, and then we contacted them to see if they would be interested in participating. Because the idea behind all this was maybe we did not need to have a different panel every time. We want them to be comfortable and knowledgeable about what's going on with that. Changing panel members all the time will create learning issues. So we have a specified panel should the system decide to go to that hearing officer level.
And Mr. Porter, if I could clarify one thing. During the system's appeal process, this round, Jeanette mediated that conversation between those systems. So I just wanted to clarify that that's where the mediation, she was the mediator, and we talked a lot about just give the information, keep it black and white as you work through, so.
And my last question, both of these public schools are partially in my district, so. I suppose I'll have some questions. We're on a 5-year cycle.
Correct.
Surely it doesn't take 5 years to get off this.
So interesting that you bring that up. We have a lot of conversation in the agency about how long that process should take. As the ARC makes the recommendations and the areas for improvement to the school system, they try to give them a time frame as well. They work to try to give a time frame. I'll give you an example. One of the systems had no evidence of individualized plan of study program for their students. That's not something they're going to be able to put a plan together and bring evidence of implementation of in the near future. That one's going to need to be extended, right? For another one might have issues with process and that they need to just begin to develop and get involved in a process, schedule those, et cetera. So the whole morning I keep thinking about differentiated status to the conversation Dr. Watson brought you to where we are now. The way the ARC has to work with these systems is differentiated. You have a private system with 2 public systems today. The request and the asks of those private systems might look a little different than the request and the ask of a public system due to resources. So they work really hard to differentiate those AFIs based on the need of each system.
And
there's
is
a
it,
timeline.
is it reasonable for me to ask what the timeline is for the 2 schools that are before us today
Sure,
that are recommended for conditional accreditation?
Yeah, we can answer that for you, or even better, if you were to ask those systems what their timeline was, that information is there for them as well. But it's in their report. When they put those IFIs together, they typically indicate a timeline. Great questions, thank you.
So depending upon the recommendation of the area for improvement, they might have different timelines for each. Because they take into consideration how long it might happen. If, like Michelle said, if they need implementation, then it might be maybe towards the end of the year. But if they just need a plan, it might be sooner, just putting a plan in place. And so on each of the areas for improvement on the report, there is a section that says comment, rationale, what task it is, and then timeline. And that's the timeline that is expected.
Okay, it's right there in front of me, so. Okay.
That's all right.
That's okay.
It's new to all of us.
Yeah, I forget about that sometimes too.
Yeah, I just looked, thank you very much.
Okay, Ben Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm really loud. This is exciting. I like being loud. First of all, this is something that the state board hasn't done, and the conversation I have with Janet and her entire tenure here on the state board of even talking about something like this. So this is a big deal in education, and this is a strong message we are sending with this. But I asked this question in terms of El Dorado, which the recommendation did change, correct, to fully accredited, correct? When I read that. And a lot of it had to do with the change in leadership. And how are we working with districts to let districts know that the accreditation isn't dependent upon the superintendent? It needs to be the district involved in the accreditation. Because when you have a change in leadership that happened in El Dorado, it, at an inopportune time, which the average superintendent lasts at a district about how long, Randy, do you know? Maybe 3 or 4 years? Yeah, on the size of the district, but, I mean, there's some districts that have gone through a lot of superintendents, and, you know, they're no longer, very rare do superintendents stay in the same spot for 35 years anymore, like they once did, and how are we preparing those districts and reaching out to those districts to make it more institutional and more system part of the accreditation versus it hinging on the chief executive of the district or the superintendent?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. So you hear in redesign a lot about teacher leadership in that process. Our process is no different. And I think it's at that level, Mr. Jones, that you really begin to see a process come to life. It can't be designed and developed at the district level and assumed that the buildings are going to be implementing. It is all about involvement of full staff. That's why we talk about this idea of process. And our training with systems is to say, please don't sit in your district office and just think you can fill out the reports and everything will be okay. The state board has very clearly defined their goals toward the achievement of every student in Kansas, right? Each and every one. So you cannot implement that with fidelity and with the kind of embedded processes you're talking about if you don't involve your teachers in that as well. So that's our direction to leadership, is that when you leave, it should carry on with or without you in that superintendent seat. I will tell you, El Dorado was very cognizant of their major shift in leadership change and had been in touch with us from the get-go on, she came and said, I think I'm in a pickle, or a year ago. So, and we support in whatever manner we can, but it's that deeply embedded nature. You saw that, I think, when Wichita came to you. At the system level, they were working a super process that was going out to building level leadership that now is all in play to go out to teacher level leadership, right? And I think you'll see achievement and whatnot move with that system as well. So I appreciate the question.
Yeah, and I just, when I was training at the point that accreditation is not a administrative only decision or conversation. It needs to be an entire district conversation to have.
Correct.
Entirely, and I wanted to stress that point.
Yeah, thank you.
Entirely, just so when one person leaves the district, it doesn't upend the entire process.
That's exactly right, and we deeply embed that in our
But
trainings.
that's also the purpose. A good backstop with the appeals process is that even though the original didn't go as well, but they were able to appeal that decision, and so that's an important step in there that districts need to utilize in case they're caught in that web again. But I appreciate the time, Madam Chair, and
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, so next month, these recommendations will come back to us.
Yes, ma'am.
So if you have further questions or clarifications, I'm sure you can get hold of Michelle, or we'll have an opportunity in September to go over these also. So thank you very much, and thanks for the explanation as far as the process. And then the point being made of making sure that it is a system-wide process. And folks at all levels are involved. So, very good point.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next we're going to have, from Brad, we're going to have information on feedback from the field regarding the start of the 2021 school year. So I think Brad's got a PowerPoint to share with us, so welcome.
Well, I'm really excited that I have an additional 10 minutes to talk.
We are too.
Okay.
That doesn't mean go slower, Brad.
I have a hard time going slower, so. Madam Chair of the Board, thanks for allowing me a few minutes just to give you an update. It seems like, March was years ago, but just to remember, as soon as schools started working on continuous learning, we then went into what we called stage 1 and spent the month of May trying to take the standards and putting them into some competencies, because a lot of districts were struggling. How do I measure learning when they're not physically here? And what are the key competencies that we would want all students to know and be able to do, even in a remote or hybrid? So stage 1 was the month of May. We went into stage 2, which we had on the learning side over 110 educators in 4 grade bands working on creating the navigating change guidance, the instructional part. If you remember, about 90 to 95% of those 1,100 pages are all about instruction. That was stage 2. They brought that document along with the operations to you in July. And immediately we went into stage 3, which is then stage 3 is how do we support our schools and teachers in implementing this and working in a new normal. So Tammy Mitchell and Sarah Perryman and a few others worked with, we had about 345 teachers that volunteered, or educators. You can see here, 80% of them were certified teachers. We had certified staff, instructional coaches, curriculum directors, had some administrators. But these were volunteers that wanted to be engaged, and as soon as we were bringing to you the Navigating Change guidance in July, we turned it over to them and asked them some key questions on what support are you going to need. So this is kind of the makeup of those, but again, I don't want to say this is reflective of the whole state. This is reflective of 345 people that volunteered and said, I want to give some voice to this. So just to make sure, this wasn't just 345 random. These were ones that were really engaged and was following the work of the board and those teams. We had a really good representation of these, there were 347 schools that were represented based on, so it wasn't just a lot of them in one school or one district, and there was a good range variety in all the board regions. So 347 schools were represented on this. The schools, 38% of them by school type were 6 through 12. We had 43% were elementary. We had some that classified as some other configuration. And then we had some early childhood. Community type, we had good representation from rural, suburban, urban. So we were trying to look at, you know, who was it that was speaking to us on this. What was really interesting is we had asked them, choose the area that you teach in. And the grade bands, again, so they chose whatever grade band represented them, and it was really nice to get good voice from pre-K through 2, 6 through 8, so it was a really good balance of getting input across all 4 grade bands. Of the responses, and again, these were volunteers that were engaged, about 40% of them answered the question, how prepared do you think you're going to be? About 40% said, well, I'm somewhat to not at all prepared. 60%, I'm mostly prepared, I'm prepared or very prepared. So even of engaged teachers during the summer, about 40% were just saying, hey, I'm plugged into this, but looking at this document, I'm going to need a lot of help. I'm going to need a lot of support. So I don't want to come off that 60% of all of our teachers are mostly, you know, these were just of the ones that, again, were engaged in the process. We next asked them, what barriers do you see? And these are ranked by responses. Number 1, time. We need time to be able to prepare for this upcoming school year. You'll notice a lot of your school districts went ahead and pushed back the start of the school year, took professional development days that were in the calendar and front loaded to try to give a lot of their teachers and staff some more time to prepare. Second, common understanding of how to implement competency-based learning. And again, when we're talking about that, in the event that you have to go remote, how are you going to measure learning? How are you going to provide cross-curricular competencies? Because you may have staff that are working remotely. So a lot of really good lessons that were put in there, but a common understanding. Third, staff buy-in. Just trying to get all staff to buy in to, we're going to have to do learning differently. And then just lack of background knowledge from certified and classified staff. So those were the top barriers that these educators told us that they were going to be facing going into this. When we asked, then what are your professional learning needs? Number 1 was how to do competency-based learning, how to apply it, how to measure it, how do we assess learning. Second, engaging the community. Again, this is one of our core redesign principles. And if school districts did not and teachers have that good communication between school and community going into this, and it's clear here, that's one of their biggest needs. We just added recently, I think Dr. Watson shared with you, some guidance for parents on our navigating change, but we're going to have to provide our schools some additional supports on communicating and engaging their community. Online learning tools. A lot of districts are looking at, if I have kids remotely, how can I, there's a lot of online tools that are very useful, but it is not just putting a kid on a computer at home and checking in with them for 20 minutes every day. That's an inappropriate use of a good tool, but there's a lot of really good tools that can enhance remote learning. Virtual instruction and then personalized learning. So some of the support that we're working on right now, this morning from 8 to 11 was our third. We have over 50 of our staff, service center staff, some of our staff going through trainings, because we want to make sure that every district, there's common language, there's common resources, there's common support. So of those 50 to 60, there's probably 30 service center people. We have some of our TASN folk. We have a lot of our staff being trained by our comp center, which is McCrell, and then they're also partnering with AIR, a lot of other national groups that are working to train our staff to be able to turn right around and then provide supports to our school districts. That training will go on for the next 12 months because we know that, it's not just what we need to get them in the month of August, it's going to be ongoing as we move through. So this training of that cadre will be for a full year, but we started that here late July, early August. Those cadre will then turn around and support through your service centers, through our TASN folks, and then through our agency. Service centers right now have they rolled out some new stuff this week. And the difference is it is predominantly online virtual because we can't serve 286 school districts in person. So we're creating these trainings, we're putting them out there. You can go to, for example, Greenbush University, it's called Greenbush, but it was several service centers came together with our staff. A 1-hour training that you can log into on how to unpack the navigating change document. How to then, so there's over 50, but we're going to continue this cadre to put on-time, meaningful lessons where teachers can access anytime, anywhere. So working on that with the service centers this month. We just released, or should be releasing today, we pulled together several school districts that we knew were already bringing their teachers in early, putting together plans on how do we do in person when 10% of our students are working remotely? How do we engage those students remotely? What are strategies when, like Dr. Watson said, we're doing a hybrid, so we only have half the students in person, but the other half are at home. What are strategies to meaningfully engage those remote learners? And then strategies for, we are now all remote. Other than we may have some high risk, some special needs need to come in. What are strategies now that I can be working remote? So we're getting ready to release that. It's done. We're pretty sure it'll be on our website again as another edition. We've got book studies, webinars that some of our our staff are doing. on distance learning strategies. And we know many of you saw last night a lot of school board meetings. You know, they're making decisions, they're putting plans, but I'd say the predominant, what I'm hearing from districts, they're looking at their models, but now that teachers are coming in, they're getting them the navigating change, they're getting them the strategies, there's online professional development from the service center. So the month of August is going to be a lot of preparation time for teachers. So with that, I still have 20 minutes if you want me to back up.
Thank you, Brad. Appreciate the presentation. I've got some questions coming in, so Dina Horst is up first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wondered I didn't see anything that said you were working with the collegiate component where future teachers are being trained. So are we doing some sort of communication with the colleges of education so that they are going to, so those students will come out already
Yes.
prepared for this?
So today, my goal today was just to give you an update on where the school districts are. But in the meantime, so Michelle Miller, Catherine Schmidling that works with higher ed, they are also in communicating, keeping them updated, sharing all of our navigating change, our resources, because we know as those teachers go back into their programs, they're going to have to be using those as resources. So yes, Michelle and Catherine continue to communicate with higher ed, our teacher prep programs on all the new resources.
Okay, thank you.
Ann Maw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brad, on the professional learning that we have available, is this on our website, the KSDE website, or is this something the service centers are doing? Or?
Right now it's on the service center websites, but I'm meeting with the directors. Well, I got a meeting tomorrow at 1, and then we're pulling all the directors together. We're not used to just going straight virtual because most of our agency's training has been in person. So you'll see computer science, there was a schedule of all the drive-ins and the people coming to. We're having to totally go to a virtual professional development. So we're going to work with the service centers because they have key staff that could quickly create a statewide Kansas professional learning website. They have, some of them are very skilled in the video and all, so we're going to partner with them. Our goal is to create a one-stop teachers at any time because their professional development calendars just got hijacked because they front-loaded, so they're going to have access, all Kansas educators. You know, so we don't currently have that, but we're going to work with the service centers to create a one-place website where they can get, because I don't believe we will have in-person professional development anytime soon.
Well, and that's okay. A couple of concerns. One is that I assume we put this out to all the superintendents, here's what we have available. But sometimes that doesn't get down to the teacher level, or the bigger districts don't use the service centers at all, and the teachers never hear about this awesome stuff that's available. Can teachers access this, any of this individually?
Yes, so I'll give you an example, like Greenbush University, and again, it was created by last January, February, we were working with service centers to prepare for our in-person summer academies. As soon as we had to cancel those because of COVID, that team quickly turned around and created all those virtual ones. There are, as of last Friday, there were over 11,000 teachers had accessed and used those trainings from like 250 some school districts. So it's messaged, it's available, it's not just for, well, it's only for our members and it's free.
Okay.
There's
well,
no cost,
I
so
just need
it's
to
just
get-
communicating, continuing.
Well, because of all the new emails we got, I now have a group of 450 teachers who want to stay connected. And I'd like to
Yes.
give them this information if I can get the contact
Yes,
thing.
we'll
Thank you.
make sure.
Steve Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brad, it's been good knowing you. You have been inspirational at many levels since I've known you, and I'd like you to speculate on philosophy here a bit. I'm thinking about a conversation I had with Kathy in Wichita. She said probably 3 or 4 times during our hour-long conversation, well, Steve, if you want to blow up the system, ... I don't know if you remember that. But I didn't want to blow up the system, but the system has been blown up. So I'm going to be a tutor for the next several years in Johnson County, I'm sure. I've been a tutor for 25 years, math and physics mostly. And I think I should have a STEM license. That's just my personal opinion. I don't know how I would go about demanding one, but that's what I'd like to have. So I want to plant that seed. But what I really want you to speculate on for our board right now is how do we motivate those pre-K through 2? Because the grade bands that have come to be, the 4 major bands, are music to my ears. I couldn't ask for better. I mean, if I've helped and bring those about, I'm very gratified. But we have to motivate these kids before they get to 3rd grade, because by the time you get to a 3rd or 4th grader, if they're not motivated, we're losing them. And we lose them in poor districts more than we lose them in wealthy districts, as you know. And some teachers are really great at motivating kids, and other teachers, they're just not that great at it. And so how would we differentiate those teachers who are really good at it and pay them more, as opposed to the teachers who, they're not really great motivators? I mean, not everybody is a great motivational speaker or makes a scintillating presentation, or some folks just, that's just not part of their makeup. Would you agree, Brad, that it is essential that kids are motivated to learn before they get to 4th grade?
Absolutely.
So, again, speculating on the big picture and philosophy, how could we build a system that's as good as anywhere in the country, if not in the world, so that by the year 2040, people come to Kansas because we do it better than anybody else, and we differentiate those teachers who are terrific from those who are mediocre, from those who are lame, as well as go the extra mile for those families who need extra help. I know there's like 17 things in the question I just asked, but I want to pin it to motivation. How do we motivate those early students who need something outside the family to get that motivation?
Well, I think we were on our way there with, first of all, I think those schools, which when I say schools, you're really talking about people, they have to have a desire to do something different. We now have over 70 school districts with close to 200 buildings with the desire, but it is not easy. I was on a Zoom this morning with one of our redesigned back to school, just getting them charged up, and you can see, but that may not be the same desire down the road. So one, I think we were well on our way, but when we work with those redesigned districts, we tell them, first of all, you got to get out of your comfort zone. And that next zone is very much a fear zone. It's just human nature, and we got to work together to get into the learning zone. The difference now is there's not a teacher, there's not a parent, there's not a community, nobody's in a comfort zone right now. the whole nation, including me, is in that fear zone where we have excuses, we argue with each other, but as a community, we have all 286 in our privates, we've got to help each other get out of the fear zone into a learning zone where we can start doing the things differently, using the navigating change, because the people that worked on that are the type of people that are doing it at home. If we use that and we take this opportunity, because no one in the next 6 months is going to go back to a comfort zone. It's just not going to happen. But we're going to create a whole new comfort zone, and it's going to look different because we've just all been forced to do that. And some will do it better. Our job is to try to give them the supports to get out of that fear zone into that learning zone, where ultimately we're in a new growth zone, which is our new comfort zone.
Jim Porter?
I want to follow up on the fear thing. You know, 2 or 3 weeks ago, a whole bunch of us got a lot of contacts. Before that time, my telephone rang once every 2 or 3 weeks. Now it rings half a dozen times a day or more. Those people sort of found our numbers. And I seriously doubt that I'm unique in that situation, but there are 2 fears. The first one, I don't have any idea how to help people. And they both deal with remote learning. Fear number 1 is I have to work and my kids are going to be at home. You know, I'm not asking you to answer that question because I don't know that there is an answer, but we need to. But that's a real problem that families are facing, especially families with young children, where they have to go to work or not eat. Okay, so I'll get off of that and go to the next one. The next one is and I know that this is not what we were saying, but there is a consistent misunderstanding about what remote learning is. How is my 5-year-old going to sit in front of a computer 6 hours a day? And so what I've been saying, and I've had people argue with me, it says in the book, so many minutes a day, you know, and so that's what it means. Well, I think that I know that we've communicated differently from that, but I just want to emphasize that we need to continue to emphasize that there are other activities. It's not sitting at a computer. It's art, it's music, it's PE, and it doesn't have to be done Monday through Friday. You can do activities on the weekends with your family, all those sorts of things. If you have 3 hours today and 3 hours on Saturday, that's okay. I just want us to make sure that the people that are making decisions in schools know that we are giving them significant flexibility, and don't be constrained by that 6 hours a day, because that will be ineffective. And so I guess I didn't have a question. I just wanted to make those 2 points that I really want us to encourage creativity, because I'm finding that a lot of people have misrepresented or misunderstand that process.
Yes, we try to make clear over and over there's a balance. 1, it is not appropriate to set a kid on a computer and say, Mom, Dad, good luck with your kid. That's not appropriate. But I've seen some really creative plans early on. Give you an example. You might go to, I'll think of the school here in just a second, Spring Hill. Go out there, they've already have given sample examples of what the day would look like for a remote learner. The student zooms in with their regular classroom. They hear daily announcements. They get their birthday celebrated just like if they were set, you know, for the first 30, 45 minutes. Then they're going to assign them a lesson. We want you to do some reading. We're going to give you a choice of some things to do. Don't forget, we're going out to recess. So here's some strategies for you to get outside, get some exercise, you know, so they're being very creative about flexibility on how they engage. So we give a lot of examples of how you might engage those. But the biggest one is, do not just purchase some online software and set the kid at home, and they need to be engaged with their peers as much as possible. They need access to counseling. They need access, and you can be creative in how you do that. We're just giving you the authority to then count that kid as if they were in person. They've got to have, there's certain assurances that both the parents and the school agree to. Otherwise, so yes, it's important.
Janet Law.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am very concerned about staffing for this year. I've been informed that many teachers took early retirement, some changed careers, and also I'm especially concerned about substitutes because I don't know a figure, but I'm assuming that about 70% at least are retired teachers, and many of them are probably not going to sub this year. So have you had any feedback, I guess is my question, and how are we going to handle this?
Yeah, it is very much Randy and I were just talking early this morning, it is very much a concern. But I do know a lot of districts are thinking creatively on how they use subs. You may not want to come in and sub, but I'm going to hire you as a sub to connect with these 10 kids daily. I'm going to, not only as a teacher will I make a connection with them, but we're going to use you as a sub to also give them as much support as they can. A lot of times you'll be able to help them. If so looking at more creative ways on how they use the subs that don't want to come in. But yes, we hear from a lot of districts, and I don't have an answer on the true reality, but we've talked for a long time. If you don't provide some flexibility to your staff to work differently, you may very well lose some of those staff because of the non-flexibility. So be creative.
Brad, thank you for the presentation. I would think in the next few months as we're coming up, it'd be probably good for the board to see some best practices that are going, and I know there's going to be tons of them out there, and I guess that's really a future agenda item, but to kind of give us an ongoing report of how things are going, because we're going to have some folks coming up with some real creative solutions. We know Brad's writing that on his hand, or asking somebody to write that down.
My book's back there.
Gotcha. But as we continue to go, to just kind of talk about some of the things, and then for various size districts, because it's going to look a little different in different places, but we've got some incredibly creative folks out there, and I know it's daunting, but I also know some folks are going to come up with some really incredible solutions, and we've just got to share what's going on.
Yes, we saw that this summer when all of those educators volunteered to say, let me come up with strategies, and they did an amazing job. Now we've got to help implement them.
Right, exactly. Okay, well, thank you, Brad. Appreciate the update, and board members, we'll take a little recess for lunch, and we'll be back at 1:30. Thank you.